Good afternoon, everybody. If we'll just give it a minute or so to let everyone get in. We've got quite a few people joining us today, so we give it 60 seconds or so to get as many people in as possible. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's great to see so many of you here. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I'm just going to give it another 30 seconds or so to get everyone in. Got quite a lot of people trying to join at the same time. So obviously Teams is just taking its sweet time about it as usual. We'll keep admitting people as we go, but delighted to have so many of you on the call with us today. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure we'll get a few people join us as we come along, but without further ado, I'll get started. So for those of you that have not met me before, hopefully you all have, but my name is Dr. Nicola Harding. I'm the CEO of We Fight Fraud, and today our session is Think Like a Fraudster, How Shared Intelligence Keeps fincrime teams ahead of the game. And today's session is a really interesting one from my point of view, because collaboration and working together is the buzzword on everyone's lips, particularly with recent regulation changes in the financial crime prevention kind of world. We're all looking at how we tackle the issue of financial crime, and this kind of keyword of collaboration keeps coming up. Working with our partners, Salv, we constantly are having these conversations about, you know, some of the challenges, some of the threats that criminals pose, but also the opportunities that there can be as well. So I'm really keen to have this discussion today, and thank you for joining us. If you kind of have missed the start, we're only just getting started anyway. But if you can't stay for the whole session, it's okay. It will be recorded and put into our community. So if any of your colleagues do miss it, please tell them to join in and come and take a look back at the recording. So like I say, I'm Dr. Nicola Harding. I'm the CEO of We Fight Fraud. I'm also a criminologist, and I specialise in financial and serious organised crime and lived experience. I'm joined today for today's session by my colleague Tony Sales. Tony, if you can introduce yourself for me.
Hello, yeah, I'm Tony Salv. I'm formerly known as Britain's greatest ex-fraudster, now helping everyone try and fight back against this tsunami of fraud that we continue to see. So hopefully delving into some good stuff today.
Brilliant, thank you, Tony. Yeah, and he is a social engineering expert, but also the Chief Innovation Officer here at We Fight Fraud, where we utilise his expertise and knowledge. And I'm also joined by Ester Eggert, who's the head of product at Salv. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and Salv, Ester, please?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Ester Eggert. At Salv, I'm head of product. So Salv is basically a RegTech company offering different solutions to financial institutions as well as to the public sector. About myself is that I've been a practitioner actually for quite many years. I've done a lot of work in the private sector, but also in the public sector. But when it comes to the wider area of defense, in addition to just financial crime, but right now for the past 3 years, it has been really exciting to lead the way to a more collaborative approach to crime fighting.
Brilliant, thank you, Esther. And this is why I love our conversations where we kind of really get into the nitty gritty, because I think when you have been a practitioner across different areas, you can get a much broader, holistic view of the problem. And that's really what we're trying to bring in today's agenda. So often we hear the phrase thrown around, think like a fraudster, and I hope that piqued your attention enough to get you here. But we're going to kind of extend your and ask you to stretch your brain and understanding rather than simply thinking like a fraudster, which I'm pretty sure Tony will tell you shortly is a very difficult task indeed. And I have to say, part of my job before working with Tony and the We Fight Fraud team, it was to try and get in the minds and get a greater understanding of people with lived experience. And thinking like a fraudster is a very difficult thing and not a pastime I would implore you all to do. But I do think there is a whole load of value in looking at how fraudsters think and crucially how they communicate, and that's what we're going to do today. And then I'm going to flip it back onto Esther a little bit and saying, so this is what the criminal world's doing. How should fintechs and financial institutions, like, how can we take those tactics and flip them back onto the criminal themselves? And then we're going to have a bit of a discussion in terms of how shared intelligence can keep fincrime teams ahead of the game, especially if we consider what the criminals are up to and how we defend against them and ultimately try and get ahead. So there will also be time for Q&A. So a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session is going to be recorded. So if you do want to watch it back, or any of your colleagues want to watch it back, it'll be in the We Fight Fraud community. If you haven't got a sign in for the We Fight Fraud community, you can get a whole host of our previous webinars. You can find out more about our partners like Salv in there, and get advice and access to our Q&As and things like that. So if you haven't got that, then there will be a link just popped up in the chat there for you to access that and get a login. But we will have time for Q&A. So this is, again, where I implore you guys, if you've got a question or a comment on anything that you see throughout the session, please just pop it in the chat and we will do our best to get round to your questions. If we don't get a chance to answer them here, we will go and answer them for you in the community where you can access us directly. So that's what we've got over the next kind of 50 minutes. Please do communicate with us, pop your comments in the chat, respond to what we're saying. But firstly, we are going to go into this whole concept of thinking like a fraudster and communicating like a fraudster. And this is where really I want to hear from Tony. Like, we kind of, Andy, who we work with, right? So Andy McDonald was the head of fraud and counter-terrorist financing at New Scotland Yard and in the Met, and he's always kind of said, you know, criminals, we've got all this red tape. If we want to do a project, you know, in the police or in an organisation that is going to focus on preventing criminal attack, we've got to go through all these different layers of red tape, and we've got to communicate and emails and Teams and, you know, in-person meetings, all of this structure that we've got to organise. But he would quite simply say criminals can go from there to there, one line, without any of that, which does make it seem very much like it's very simple for criminals. They just do it all themselves, and that actually there isn't the layer of complexity that we have to go through. And so I guess I want to throw that back onto you, Tony. Like, is it really that simple for criminals that, you know, they're just doing it all themselves, or actually is there much more going on there?
I mean, there's much more going on. You know, most criminals are plugged in, right? So just like how it's the same thing, yeah. So defending an attack is the same as you need all these different types of things to all fit in, don't you? To kind of marry up. So you need all these different elements of bit to create an attack. So you know, just like when we set up to do testing, I kind of head up the team because I'm so familiar within all of those attacks that we continue to say are old school attacks, right? There's nothing new. There are no new ways of being able to target stuff. There's just new tools that allow you to target them, right? And those tools become part of the attack plan that you then use. So, you know, most serious organized crime groups are going to be plugged in on multiple levels.
I think the kind of the communication then, like when you say plugged in, like the communication is happening. This isn't like, when we're talking about serious organized crime, which obviously we do get lone wolf kind of fraudsters. They're usually the ones that you hear more about, to be honest, because they're usually the ones that get caught and you say, there was this, fraudster that was kind of preying on vulnerable elderly victims or whatever, and they're usually portrayed as these kind of lone wolf characters. But when it comes to serious organized crime, there's whole networks of people that have to communicate and cooperate, right?
Yeah, I mean, and they do that. They have their own KYC. Yeah, they have their own way of doing it, don't they? So, like, right, mate, what's happening? Listen, do you know Charlie Mike? Yeah. Oh, yeah, I worked with him a few years ago. What's he like? Oh, he's a grass bruv. Oh, what? Yeah, like, oh, stay away from him. Like, you have those networks that you're plugged into, and the more you go up, the more people you know. Like, the criminal world is the information that spreads in the criminal world is like no other. Yeah, like this side, we would love to be as fast as them at spreading information and being able to tap into the information instantly, because it all comes down to who you know. Whereas just like, we always say we've got this mad red tape all around us that don't allow certain elements to talk to certain elements. Yeah. The criminal world doesn't have that. We can find out information about someone very quickly. Just depends on how plugged in you are to that criminal network. Even down to understanding encrypted phones. Like only certain levels of criminals would want encrypted phones. Like there's different ways and different elements. There's some criminals that don't even want phones. They don't want no connection with none of that stuff. Yeah, they're totally out. Yeah, you talk to me in person, you have to make a meeting. That's how it goes. Like, you've got all these different types of elements everywhere.
I think one of the things we do at We Fight Fraud is we've got a crime drama called Crooks, and it's a docudrama. Essentially we have former criminals playing former criminals to keep it as authentic as possible, and the storylines come directly from real world kind of criminal attacks that have happened. And one of the key things when we talk about cooperation and that, when we think about how criminals work together, is we can make a lot of assumptions about, is it just like local groups and things like that. So what I wanted to do is just show a little bit about how criminals cooperate together. If we could be a fly on the wall, what might that look like? So I'm going to show you that now. So this is real world criminal attack, but dramatized to ensure that we don't all get arrested. And take a look, and then we can discuss a little bit about what's going on.
Алло, Вадим, привет. Как мне надоели все эти люди. Мы им явно предложили намного больше, чем они этого заслуживали. Мне придется самой с этим разобраться. Ладно, я тебе перезвоню. Давай, пока. Можешь шутить?
Signora, un momento, per favore.
Gino, ti ho detto di non disturbare.
Scusi signora, è Mosco per lei.
Un attimo, tesoro, dai, devo andare, ciao. Grazie, Gino.
Prego.
Pronto?
Hello, sweetie.
Ciao, Dasha.
Ciao, Bella.
I come from an Italian family, which is a mafia family. Of course, we know we're established for hundreds of years. It's our bloodline, I guess. And where the difference is with Dasha is that the Eastern European mafia, it's new money, it's business, they're not as family orientated.
I need some help with you about the thing that we discussed before, and I need it quite quickly.
The last time Dasha and I met, she was discussing with me this acquisition she wanted to make of this company she was really interested in and quite excited about it. Unfortunately, they've rejected her offer, so she's very, very upset about it. Of course, darling, yeah. Let's say in 2 weeks at my restaurant. She knows I have contacts in the UK to be able to make it really awkward for this company and force them back to the table and renegotiate with her.
I can't wait, and I hope I will be paying the bill this time.
I'd gladly give her my help due to the fact she's helped me in the past. But of course, there's also, she's going to pay me €5 million, so I'm not going to say no.
Bye.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao, ciao.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm in the top one, look.
Where is it?
Where you vibrating, look. Yeah, it's got to be that one, look, it's got to be that one.
It's just going to be her.
Hello?
Hello, darling. I have to pay a fortune every month for this encrypted phone, because it's the only one she'll talk to me on. But it's always worth it when she phones.
Hi, darling, you okay?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you? Long time. Her father's Italian, her mother's English. So she was over here visiting some family in England. And we met at this charity do and was introduced.
I just needed your help with something. Do you remember that day trip we went to a couple of months back with Vito to that company? Yeah. That day trip with Vito means we compromised a company before for another acquaintance of mine a few months back. So he would remember that so that you don't have to spell that out on the phones. Well, I would like to, in a couple of weeks, do something similar.
OK, 2 weeks. I might have to hurt someone.
No, darling. I can't have anything like that. It's too risky. The company wouldn't, you know, it's a respectable company. It won't happen that way, so...
OK, what's it worth then?
€2.5 million in bitcoins.
Oh, OK then. Yeah, we got the people on the firm who can sort that out for you, darling, no worries.
I thought you might like that. OK.
I'm an old school criminal. In my day, just go and get me gun, go and hold up a security court van, nick all the cash. Brilliant, easy. Can't do it nowadays. Too many cameras everywhere. Moved into the drug game after that. Moving boxes and boxes of stuff all over the world, through Europe, into the UK. But nowadays, everyone's asking me for data. Data? Now, don't ask me about it. I ain't got a clue how it works. But I don't need to know. Because what I do know is the people who know.
Where's my sweets? Where's my sweets? Where's my sweets? Sweets.
Say bloody sweets, hold on a minute.
Sweets, where's my sweets? Where's my sweets?
Oh, God, who's ringing me now? Hold on. Hold on, bloody sweets, hold on. Oh, my God, this blinking phone.
Sweets.
Hello?
Where's my sweets?
What's all that racket in the background?
Oh, it's my daughter, mate. She's driving me nuts, bruv, for sweets. I've just picked her up from school.
Sweets.
Right, that's good news. I've got a big catch lined up. So, I want you to come and do a bit of fishing.
Yeah?
My sweets.
All right, bruv, no worries, man. Let me go and drop her off, get her some bloody sweets, and then I'll come and see you, all right? No worries, bruv.
Sweets.
All right, man. See you in a bit, bruv. Bye, mate, bye.
Sweets.
So we saw there with the crooks how various different levels of criminal activity, how kind of in that one sequence, not only are they having to communicate, and obviously in this instance, we allude to the kind of encrypted phones and stuff like that, but just how the diversity of the types of backgrounds that are having to work together. We would often assume for a shared goal, but in this you can see that the goals are all different. It's just that all of the players are highly motivated, generally by money, to achieve those different goals and down the chain. So it kind of shows, doesn't it, Tony, that criminals have to work together far more often than we expect. So when we see like big, kind of periods of criminal activity or terrorist activity, that actually there's a load of cooperation that happens behind that, and real-time intelligence sharing and stuff that has to happen. Otherwise, they can't pull it off, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen it recently, haven't we, with the NCA pulling down, that whole kind of network and getting to malware and discovering that there's all drugs and stuff behind it. I mean, this is stuff we've known for a long time, right? So to get to, big cartels sell copious amounts of drugs, but they also understand information because they're very smart at hiding money, right? Which crosses all of these different sectors that we talk about constantly. Because, like, most serious organized drug dealers, they're very good business minds. Yeah, they have exceptional business minds because they've worked their way up, or when they've been given their shot, they've taken it in that moment. They're ruthless. They've got all those other bits. And so just like any head of any company wants to know information about everything that's going on, whether that be competitors, how we can make more money, how do we plug into more people, what more products can we get that are going to allow us to get more money in, so we can buy more stuff to get more money in. Like, that's just how they set it all up. And so nowadays, I mean, it's interesting, we wrote that 3 years ago, I want to say. I mean, it's a good 18 months before anyone knew anything about EncroChat, right? And to see it all kind of still be current in the way that, even the NCA coming out with all this stuff, that's something that we've had down for all that time, because we have an understanding of what's truly going on out there and how it's all connected to different bits, right?
Ultimately, there's a food chain, isn't there? And I guess that we're thinking about in the fraud prevention world, like, fraud prevention is one aspect of financial services that fits in a broader chain where you've got competing and conflicting kind of the kind of competing and conflicting, like, values or aims and goals, haven't you? We've got customer service teams who want to reduce the friction. We've got fraud prevention teams that would ideally like to increase the friction, so reduce fraud. The same kind of goes for the criminal world, really, as you can see in that sequence. They're not all there to do the same thing. Their overall goal isn't the same as the one who's kind of directed the piece of work at the beginning. Ultimately, Tommy at the end doesn't even know anything about why they want that company compromised. It's not his business. What he cares about, what's he got to do, and how does he get it done, and who does he need in order to make that happen. And technology can be, whether it's encrypted phones, messaging groups, everyone talks about kind of Telegram and stuff like that, and the ways in which communicate. One of the things you told me, actually, that just come up in other regions, I've been talking a lot about kind of domestic abuse and the way in which stalking happens, is sending malicious and harassing messages through like the reference numbers of financial transactions. And I remember bringing that to you years ago when I was supporting a woman it was happening to, and you told me that's always been done. That's like criminal tactics just to communicate, right? And it blew my brain, really, because we think, we're seeing an abuse of financial services for stalking and harassment, for domestic violence victims, but actually there have been long criminal tactics.
Well, and me and Andy were talking the other day, and I said to him, Carr, years ago, when the internet first started and we all first got email accounts, we'd just write stuff in drafts, and I'll give you the password when I meet you. That's it. I'm not even talking nothing. We're just talking drafts. One person's got a login. You just go in and view the draft. That's it. I'm not giving that, and that circumvents everything in one foul swoop, because I'm never sending nothing. I'm only writing it in drafts, so there's no digital trace going anywhere. And Andy said, that's what the terrorists used to do. I said, wow, but that's just criminal networks would do that, because it's just such an obvious way of just staying behind anything, like they always, you can go back to the old mafia stuff, we're talking like this. No, they've got lip readers, and there's all like, they understand this stuff, like, communication's key in their world, because communication is what normally gets them arrested or the police involved in what they're doing. We've said it time and time again, loose lips sink ships, and that's on both sides. So,
and this is the other thing that when I talk to you about this cooperation, that that obviously, like, there's different parts, you know, a criminal isn't going to be adept at doing all stages of the kind of criminal attack, even if it comes down to, well, I've got this money because I've managed to socially engineer it out of someone. What account can I send it to because I need to now launder the money? There has to be that cooperation. But
Yeah.
the cooperation is always a risk, right? So in financial crime, there's a lot of, oh, but we can't share data, we can't do this because of GDPR, because of what, you know, other risks to, you know, competitive advantage, all these kind of things that people throw out of, well, we can't really share and we can't really cooperate because of all these reasons. We think, therefore, what, the criminals don't have risks? Like, what's the risk for criminals when they're sharing intelligence and they're cooperating with each other?
I mean, you know, people trying to nick their stuff, other criminals pretending that they're cooperating and they're not, sharing information with law enforcement. Like, there's a whole load of risk assessments that you have to go through. You know, I was notorious. If you met me for the first time and I didn't know who you was, and you just said one word that was dodgy to me, I'd strip you naked because I want to see it. You bugged me. Like, what are you here? Like, who are you? Like, that's real. Like, that stuff really happens. Like, you know, and so you just learn, Nick, to have all of these cautionary bits put in place because everyone firstly is motivated by the money. Yeah, the money is the biggest motivator in that. Yeah, so they don't need to go through the KYC. They know that if you steal money from us, I'm connected to them people. Yeah, and that's going to come back and bite you in the bum. So that prevention is always better than cure, right? So, and the criminal world is much more adept at finding people than the police world because they're motivated by the money. You know, the police, it's just another case going into their file to try and find someone with a whole mass of stuff going on. Yeah, they can only find so many, right? Whereas if a criminal steals another criminal's money or something happens, you know, they can be more resourceful for that to make that happen.
And I think we've got a question from Jacob, says, if criminals are motivated financially, which I think you've more than spelled out there, that they are, what's the motivation for financial institutions to collaborate and share information with each other? Which I think segues us really nicely into the kind of calling on Ester here to say, like, you know, collaboration has been thrown around in the you know, in the fraud prevention world. I don't know about you, but every single event I go to now, there's a call for greater collaboration, but I'm not really seeing like what that looks like in practice, and also what is the motivation. So maybe if I can ask Ester to come on there. I feel like I've got like Tony on the dark side and Ester on the light side now. So we'll come to the good side. Sorry, Tony.
That's all right.
Ester.
Yeah, motivation. That's actually a good question because you're right in saying that everyone talks about collaboration, but it never happens. So I'm a very mission-driven person, and I like to think that you know, the world operates in a way that you do something for the common good, which I know there are other people out there who think the same way, and it makes sense. But in reality, it does boil down to also having a business case behind it, because we all understand that you know, compliance in general can be interpreted as a sort of line of costs. So collaboration does need to have tangible metrics, and this has been one of the main problems that, you know, if you talk theoretically about collaboration, if you don't have actual proof on what are the benefits, then it doesn't get anywhere. Beyond the conversation. Once you really put it into practice, this is when it becomes exciting. This is when you actually see the outcomes from it. So it boils down to business metrics. I'd be more than happy to talk on a very detailed level of what these metrics can be, but I'm not going in there right now.
Can you tell us more then, if we think about not just talking theoretically about collaboration, can you go into then more so about like, how do we do this in practice? Like, what, I mean, there's the question from Chetan about what fraud data are banks ready to share for collaboration? You know, how could this happen in a practical way, I guess?
Yes, from a practical point of view, or slightly less practical, first of all, how we like to think about it is that, you know, often people say that financial institutions do not talk to each other, or the public and private sector exist in isolation or whatnot. But that's not true on this level, because we all know that financial institutions do communicate, and there are official lines of communication between the public and private sector. So that's not really the issue. The issue is how these lines of communication are being used. So if we take the financial institutions as an example, then from our point of view, how we talk about it is that we actually want to unite the investigations teams from different institutions so that they could operate as a single team. So that's a sort of a visionary concept. Obviously, there's a long way to go to get there, but this usually resonates quite well, because those people who are doing the investigations, they are very isolated. So that's the core problem that needs to be solved. But well, looking also at the question here, if we get more specific, I think people are afraid of the word data, and it is justified to some extent. We know, especially when it comes to cross-border collaboration, that local legislation in different countries might not be so favorable to doing everything you can think of. But there is a keyword, and obviously that keyword is also mentioned in today's webinar, which is intelligence. And actually, I think it was in the spring, we were hosting a roundtable where we had some representatives from the police as well. And one of them said that, there's one thing more valuable than data, and that is intelligence. Because data is raw. Data gives you a way to deduce something from it. But intelligence is already someone's hard work, and therefore it's even more valuable. And now comes the good part. When it comes to intelligence sharing, the limitations are not so strict. So essentially, we are talking about being more open about the red flags that are being seen within the cases. Also then between the public and private sector, really communicating and collaborating about those really, really bad cases, you can see. And the laws are not the blocker there. So, and usually when people start talking about the legal side, I'll be blunt here, it's usually because they haven't understood the business case. So
it's a good point. I mean, one of the questions in it, I think you're due to go on to this now, is but what particular use cases, like areas of fraud or AML, are good examples where intelligence sharing works well? And I think that's, if you could talk us through how it can work well. I've popped an illustration on screen.
Yeah, well, with our intelligence sharing product, which is called Bridge, it has been live now over 3 years, and then we have multiple use cases. Some of them work really nicely, others not so much. But one of our favorites is APP fraud and scams, because again, it links back to, first of all, tangible metrics. If we think about APP fraud, then what we emphasize is the recovery of funds, or let's say recoverability of funds. What's the probability to get the funds back to the victim? And intelligence sharing has helped with that a lot. In the markets where we are live, we have increased the probability by around 8 times. You might ask why, but basically, if you look at this flow here, this is a very, very specific example for APP fraud. Thing is that nowadays, most financial institutions operate based on a victim report and then trying to spam out a SWIFT message to somehow magically recover the funds. We all know that in most cases, it's not possible to do that. But in the background, there's lots going on. Like a lot is being said about educating the customer, as an example. Sometimes the education process is successful, sometimes it isn't. But the point is that at that point in time, when a human looks at a case and says that, I think this customer is being scammed right now, then there's, sure, you need to educate the customer. Sure, you need to do all of your current processes. But at the same time, you need to start collaboration with the investigations team sitting at the other end of the payment chain, if you think about it. Because only this way you can make sure that the mule networks are actually disrupted.
Mm.
So this gives you a chance to really recover the funds. This gives other institutions the chance to freeze the funds, to file more high quality SARs, all of this. So basically, it's a way to make the bad guys fail universally.
It's a real like practical kind of leap, isn't it, from this kind of we need to collaborate, we need to share intelligence, but it all comes to the how. And I think the urgency with, especially with APP fraud in the UK at least, and the one of the things that I like about this and even this discussion is that obviously when we're talking about regulation, we're talking about particularly the new regulations, we're talking about the UK only in terms of mandatory reimbursement. So the business case for UK fintechs and financial institutions, like it's almost written for you with the PSR regulation, because it's no longer how much money can you make out of being a fintech or being a bank. It's about how much money can you keep hold of, because the criminal threat now is going to damage the bottom line, really. So, but it's not just the UK that this is happening in, isn't it? The cross-border is such a kind of, particularly when it comes to APP fraud, it's been an overlooked area, really, or a kind of, on the back burner. So it's kind of, the urgency is there, not just in the UK, but globally, because of the urgency of fraud. But the business case, particularly for anyone operating in the UK, is, how can you keep hold of those funds, really? Jacob's asked again, if you want to begin sharing more intelligence with other financial institutions, like where would you start then? How would you get, how would you manage this?
Well, that's the problem, right? Obviously, Salv is a technology company, so we started building technology to fill a certain gap. So that's the thing, that you either can have unofficial communication channels with your personal friends to talk with them, to meet at the park, or however you choose to operate, but that doesn't work. No one has so many friends, unfortunately. But where you can start is a couple of practical things. First of all, usually understanding with whom you want to collaborate, and then actually establishing these trusted relationships and secure channels to do that. A webinar is not the place to do a sales pitch, but basically this was the reason why we started building our products, because we saw that these channels do not exist, at least not the kind of channels that you can actually make a part of your operational processes on a daily basis. And second of all, even if you theoretically have some ways to communicate, then they don't infuse trust into the whole thing. So we don't want to think of ourselves only as a technology provider, because if we would do that, we would actually fail. So in the countries where we have members now, and then we have them in quite many European countries, over 80 institutions now. What we also do is we do community events. We bring the people together so that they would see each other face to face, and it gives a more human feeling to the whole collaboration thing, So collaboration is a tricky part to tackle, but usually when people go ahead and say that, oh, but the trickiest thing is to get the sign off from my legal department, then that's not actually true. So, but there are other things to consider.
There's Emma's put a really useful link in the chat, actually, because the ICO very recently, I think last week or something, actually stood up and took a stand and issued a statement saying that information can be shared to prevent crime, and actually really dispelled this. Essentially, it's data protection is not an excuse when it comes to tackling scams and fraud. And I think in a world where we want a really clear stance on these types of things, particularly from someone like the ICO, it was really good of them to make that move. They've published practical advice and clarity on data protection and what that can mean, and how the things that organisations have to consider when they're sharing, because I think it's become almost potentially a lazy argument of people saying, well, but we can't do that because of data protection or because of GDPR, without kind of looking at it more closely. So for the ICO to take such a stand on that is a really good move in the right direction, because actually we shouldn't be kind of not doing what we should be doing because of regulations and policies that are ultimately supposed to be there to protect people, but could actually be perpetrating further harm if not used correctly. So I wanted to kind of bring together what you've just kind of have highlighted for us, Esther, in terms of the approaches that organizations are already doing this, but not on the scale that's necessarily needed. But thinking about what can we learn from thinking like a fraudster, what are the similarities and differences? We are in a continual kind of cat and mouse game, I guess, with fraudsters. If fraudsters didn't exist, all of us would be out of a job. And isn't that the goal, ultimately, for us all to retire nicely somewhere, because we haven't got fraud prevention to do anymore because the criminals are out of business? Not something I think we're going to achieve in any of our lifetimes, unfortunately, but that is the aim, isn't it, of all of us, is to put those out of business and make the world safer for everyone. So, but I think until then, there's lots of lessons that we can learn from both sides and see how actually we're all kind of playing a game. It's like an ultimate game of chess, really, maybe, to use Tony's favourite kind of games, thinking about the kind of skill that you need to combat and get ahead of each other. Is that the lessons really for me is that cooperation is critical for survival, both if you're a criminal and in the fraud prevention world. Criminals cooperate and engage with each other in ways that actually, survival in the criminal world can be life or death, right, Tony?
Yeah, I think to understand what the threats are, understanding all of these threats can be, constantly on LinkedIn. You've got a load of people talking deep fakes, right? Let's just show us, where are they? Someone do a live deep fake with their face that no one's ever seen before. They're not a famous person. Do a live deep fake where you're actually live talking in the moment. Yeah, like there's so much noise in the industry. If I'm going to use AI as a criminal, I saw someone post a picture of a dog in the woods, right? I'm just going to put Tony in the picture and then insure the dog and say my dog died. Like this simple understanding what a scam is, like we've got cyber experts talking about scams. What do they know about scams? They're cyber experts. Yeah, you're a cyber expert. You know about hacking and you know about phishing and you know about coding and all that stuff. What are you going to know about pensions fraud? How would you know anything about that? It's a totally different thing. How are you going to know about going and getting an old person's card from their door? Yeah. Or luring them into something, like we've got so much mixed information that's so mixed, and all that noise doesn't help because you've got people then talking stuff that they don't really understand. Yeah. The reality of the whole system is vulnerable. Yeah. Because all I ever have to do is get an onboard into an ID. Yeah. Once I've got an ID, I can get everything else. A person mule. We're talking about synthetic IDs. Yeah. They're easy. They're they're easy to understand. But what about real ones that are on the system existing? I hear a lot of talk about Facebook have got all these fake accounts. Well, let's get rid of all the fake bank accounts that the fraudsters have got then. Like we're all in the same boat here. Yeah, like because they're really clever and the stuff that they're doing is really smart. The way that we get better at fighting back properly is collaboration, but true collaboration, like what Esther was saying, that where you understand it, where it's not just one, there's no solution, like we always say, Nick, there's no one solution is going to solve all. We need to get layered approach properly, and increase the onion massively, super layer it out, giving our customers, our staff, full education, but understanding that the tech's also going to play a major part within that, and that's how we get better cross-border at fighting back across all of it. That's just the reality of it.
I think you're totally right, and I think it comes into Christoph's shared that sharing intelligence can also be applied to sharing modus operandi, so like the tactics and the techniques and everything. And I think that's a real that's something that we see all the time at We Fight Fraud. You know, we're continually testing people and testing organisations. We see a lot of the same vulnerabilities over and over again. But we're often in NDAs with confidentiality agreements where we can't kind of go, oh, by the way, guys, we just tested someone and found this, and show you the evidence, because, you know, we have to keep that. It's, you know, that can be competition critical for an organisation. But if those people in that industry, whichever industry it may be, were sharing like, okay, yeah, we have noticed that even if they didn't want to disclose that it's a vulnerability that they found, but if, you know, we've noticed this happening, that happening, then people are given, you know, a steer of where to look, and collaboratively together, then you can just become stronger. Like, knowledge is armor in all of this, and the more we can share that, so it doesn't always have to be, I think there's definitely a place and a role for right down to the granular, you know, collaborative investigations, because that's where you're going to really see the impact. Unfortunately, with a lot of these things, it's really difficult to measure what you prevented because of what you did. How do you measure, like, oh, if we hadn't have done this, we would have lost, you know, however millions or billions to fraud, but because we did it, it never happened. How do you find, you know, the resolution for that? Whereas, you know, when you're on the granular detail and you're working together in collaborative investigations, you can show, well, we managed to stop this amount of funds, we managed to impact these amount of people. And, you know, it's then at that point that you can start to see, okay, we've invested all this in prevention, this is how it's now paying off. So it is on the granular level, that really helps. But in terms of kind of sharing intelligence and techniques, it's all about giving us the focus of where to look, and almost you want to almost know where to not look for a bit. There's only so many resources, you need to be able to hone those in, and sharing that intelligence can be really, really useful in that way. I think obviously we learned from both sides, technology can be used as a tool to facilitate communication. And going back to your point, Tony, around the, you know, people in cybersecurity now advising about scams and stuff like that, is that we have a whole load of people with a whole load of talent and ability to understand all the different parts. If we can collaborate together, you don't need to double up on skills on this. You know, there's no real one-stop shop, like you said. Actually, bad intelligence happens in the criminal world, where, you know, you might get given a button or set you up. You know, there's risks in that, but there's bad intelligence in our world as well, where people, you know, in the pursuit of trying to, you know, kind of show their skills and whatnot, can point us in the wrong direction. So I guess there's a criticality of the information and the intelligence that's shared, is that then it needs to be evidenced by something. There needs to be the right intelligence from the right people, right at the right time and the right moment. And I think that cuts across sharing intelligence in terms of techniques, but also that kind of collaborative investigations and sharing intelligence at that granular level as well. Kind of a lot of chat and discussion around kind of collaboration and the quality of it or not, but also this, you know, again, we have a bit of a UK-centric focus, don't we, of APP fraud and the PSR regulations, or GDPR and data protection. All these are issues that aren't just UK focused. They're global, aren't they? Every jurisdiction has different, you know, red tape that they've got to get past to be able to have this collaborative measure. I wonder if, Esther, can I come to you on that, and kind of the bridge, it does go across different jurisdictions, doesn't it? You've managed to kind of unpick some of those jurisdictional issues. Like, what countries do you go across, and how have you found that as a challenge?
Well, definitely. I agree that some countries in Europe, and we haven't looked too much beyond Europe currently. Well, we know that the US is completely different in this. But some European countries have historically been more conservative. So again, when it comes to fraud, when it comes to intelligence sharing, then legally there are ways to do it cross-border in every single country. But let's say that some countries are perhaps mentally not there yet, but it is changing now. It is changing in the light of the new AML regulation, as an example. Although personally, I'm not very fond of talking about this regulation too much, because, you know, if we talk about a regulation that comes into force in 2 years, then are we saying that we're going to sit around for the next 2 years and wait for the regulation when there's no need to do that? So you can see that I'm slightly, from the legal side, there are some buttons that shouldn't be pressed when it comes to me, but because I really see that it's doable. But of course, for us, it's just a question that if we see that some country is very conservative when it comes to collaboration, we just stay away from them for a bit and then come back later. And the more conservative countries are being encouraged by others. Because if others are doing something, then there's the question that why are we not doing it? So even countries that maybe a year ago were like, no, nothing is allowed, their mindset is actually changing slowly, but it's changing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is a really difficult one. Whenever you try and get a whole load of people in a room, like, and with different conflicting, you know, values, cultures, but also, you know, legal frameworks, regulation that they've got to deal with, and, you know, almost how that the fraud that's occurring is being experienced in those different jurisdictions as well. It can create urgency in some areas, and maybe a bit of a lack of awareness in others. So it's a huge challenge that I guess you kind of
I mean, in some of those regions, I mean, I've had these conversations in some of those regions where they say, yeah, it'd be really difficult to do fraud here, and we don't have much fraud, and, you know, but, you know, I've said, well, I don't have to be there to do it.
Yeah, actually, on a positive note, and what has surprised me a lot was that when we started talking to the larger banks in Western Europe a couple of years ago, then Nicola, you said that you know, the whole APP fraud conversation has been very UK centric. It isn't fully true, because the first questions that we got was like, okay, but so can I collaborate cross-border? I don't want to only collaborate in the UK. Is it cross-border? It is. Okay, amazing. Then let's continue with this conversation, right? So people do have this topic in their head that solving it in a single country doesn't help on a grand scale.
I think you're right, and I think this is the difference between policymakers and people on the ground actually doing the job, because I think people. I just written a white paper with the Payments Association on cross-border payments and APP fraud, and everyone that I spoke to that's actually got a practical hand in fraud prevention, you know, working in financial institutions, or in technology providers, or in consultancy firms, anyone that's actually done the job was very much, this can't just, you know, we need cross-border. However, the regulators that obviously are policy and you know, legal people are just focusing on the jurisdiction that they're in. So I think there's a mismatch between policy and practice that I think is one of the reasons why we, you know, so when I'm kind of saying, I guess, you know, there's not been a focus on it. The actual people on the ground know what needs to be done, but often aren't heard necessarily by the policymakers or the people who are doing the kind of strategic roadmaps around this. And
it's a paranoid schizophrenic system, yeah, that wants because it wants to do transactions really fast, but it also wants to stop all the fraud. Yeah. So like we've got something that needs to happen seamlessly very quickly, but then with a whole load of checks that need to prevent that thing from happening very quickly. So it's like constantly at loggerheads, and like there's our liminal space that I would then just exploit as the criminal, like, because I know that all that's happening. So like it's just so mad how it defeats itself, you know, constantly, which is mad.
you just nailed really what Andy said earlier on. He said it's the issue not so much about collaboration within industries, which I think is not maybe as poor as it's been made out, but more that criminals are more adept at exploiting the gaps across industries for achieving the goals. And it's across industries and cross public private sectors where we've been slow to mobilise impactful data sharing. And I would definitely agree. As Tony kind of said, these are the liminal spaces. If you haven't come across, Tony and I and a few other academics and people in the industry wrote a paper for the British Journal of Criminology about the liminality of fraud, and we propose that it's these liminal spaces within which they occur. So the regulated spaces where we don't have formal structures to report or to police or to communicate. One of the key things about these spaces, which can be the spaces across industry or the spaces between siloed departments in organisations, is that if they don't have ways to communicate with each other and put structures and frameworks, that's where fraud creeps in, because it finds the grey areas. And you need to have knowledgeable actors in those grey areas who are going to police those spaces. Communication's a really key part of that. Whatever it is you're communicating about, you kind of need your eyes and your ears on the ground in those spaces that are most vulnerable. So cross-border, very vulnerable, across different organisations and the communication between them, but also across industries and public and private sector. You know, we've got all these different silos, unfortunately, and it doesn't. It's going to be the ongoing battle, I think, for us to be able to communicate within them. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to shut up for a minute and come back to both of our contributors and say, so what are the key kind of takeaway things that you'd like people to take away from today's session? Esther, if I go to you first, what should they be thinking about?
I think one of the things is that, again, collaboration isn't just a theoretical concept, that it's actually something you can do today, it's legally possible, and it comes with very, very tangible benefits. So my recommendation is not to talk so much, but start doing more. I apologize, I'm Estonian, I'm very blunt usually with these topics. But another thing which we didn't touch upon almost at all, but which I would like to highlight, that also the collaboration between the public and private sector needs to be fixed, because only between financial institutions we can do an amazing job. We can all collaborate, but we cannot put the bad guys in jail, right? So you also need to fix this next step in the process, but there are ways to do that. So I'm finishing on a positive note.
Yeah. Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And unfortunately, we run out of time in these things, don't we? And I think it's something that we should pick up in the new year, is thinking about how we can help bridge the gap between those public and private institutions as well. So yes, then Tony, over to you. What would be your takeaways from today? What could people think about, or you want them to leave today's session?
So I think that understanding the people that you're working with is really important. Yeah, like the solutions and the stuff that you're going to put into your system, understanding how that's going to benefit you because you understand the threat. Yeah, like understand the threat at depth and then bring an expert in that's going to allow that hex solution. You know, this goes back to the very first time I ever done a test years ago. I can remember after it was all sorted, I went in to sit down with the boarders. They were just going online. It was a huge retailer. It was just going online for the first time, and there was a load of new tech that they were going to use. And the person who was putting the tech in didn't even know how to help the person set the full parameters. And I think that showed me that, oh, that's just something that's being sold as a solution without any care. The people that care, you know, Esther cares, you know, like that's why she can debate stuff and disagree and give other perspectives, because she cares and understands it just like we do. Yeah. And that's really important to understand. The deepfake stuff, definitely in 2025 we'll come back to that. So because there is a whole load of barrier entry stuff, so to get to that with Joe Rogan, I think they probably, you know, you have to have avatars and all different types of stuff, but we'll have to come to that another time. So but I've loved all your questions, Michael, by the way. They've been fantastic. So yeah, great.
Yeah, and we will try and answer as many of the questions in our community. Like I say, if you haven't got a membership, just drop Niall a message, or he'll put it in the chat of how you can contact us to get a membership. For us, this is actually our last webinar of 2025, and really pleased to do it with our partners at Salv, who've been great, and looking forward to doing more work with them into 2025 and carry on these really interesting. Yeah, sorry, did I say the last one of 2025? Last one of 2024. I can't be perfect all the time, Mike. I've got to leave some room for improvement. So yeah, so this is our last webinar of 2024, but really looking forward to doing more in 2025. We've got loads coming up. If you are in our community, we do have a Q&A tomorrow at 12 o'clock till 12:30, where you can speak to Solomon and Tony, and I'll put your questions to them. So if you've got anything, or you want to carry on the conversation from today, please do join us there. It's just a Teams call. You can grab a cup of coffee or eat your lunch and join us one last time in 2024. And if we don't see you there, thank you so much for coming along and engaging with our sessions across this year and beforehand. You know, we couldn't really do it without you. I'm learning so much, not only from contributors we've had like Esther, but also from you guys that join us. So thank you so much. Have a lovely festive period, and I hope you get some relaxation, and really looking forward to seeing you in the new year in 2025. So
good luck, guys,
and we'll see you all very soon.